might get started. I think we're going to close the room at 10 past like we did yesterday. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but for the meantime, I'm just going to open us with a karakia. Please join me. Tu taua mai raro, tu taua mai roto, tu taua mai waho, kia tau ai te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tāikia. Me mihi ahau e te mana whenua o Tāmaki ara, ko Tāmaki te maunga, ko te taere hua te moana. Me waiwaka iko te awa, no oropi me ina rangi o ko tipuna, ko ngā te pākia te iwi. Ko Bijoux te whānau, ko Denise tēnei. Haere mai ki te zui nei, nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to today's webinar, everyone. It's really nice to have you here with us this lunchtime. Please feel free to eat your lunch if you need to as we go. Today we're talking about community-led placemaking with three wonderful people from across Tāmaki Makaurau. It's the third of 5 webinars on placemaking this week. And these have all been designed as a way of connecting placemakers through kōrero as we launch Placemaking Aotearoa and placemaking.nz, the website, which I encourage you to have a look at. Well, the idea is that we get to connect more across the motu, across the country, to share thoughts and experiences and support one another. And I encourage you to tune into tomorrow's conversation if you have things you want to share as well. It's essentially an open mic session, and I think Sophia will share some details in the chat about that too. And as we're letting people into the room, more and more people coming, which is wonderful. Just going to do a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. We're all probably pretty used to Zoom by now, I think, but on Monday we had a security breach, so we're being extra careful. And as I said, we're going to lock the room at 12:10. If we do happen to get a breach today, we'll abandon the Zoe, so apologies in advance if that happens. We won't restart it, unfortunately, because the link is public and it's the same link. We don't want it to just happen again. But we had no problems on that level yesterday, so we're pretty confident that we've got a tighter system now. So please keep your mics muted for the first part at least. We'll have plenty of time for questions and conversation a little bit later. Videos on if you've got them, that would be wonderful. Love to see your faces. I'm looking at all these faces I know, and some of them I haven't seen for a while, which is lovely. Some I've seen several times this week already, and that's lovely too. Please use the chat to introduce yourself, because there's probably people who don't know you and who you don't know as well. And use the chat too to share questions and thoughts as you go. We'll have time, as I said, to chat verbally. We really encourage you to be talking with us at the end, but please share as we go along in there. And also we've had a request, I guess, not to share screenshots unless everyone agrees. So if you don't want a screenshot of yourself to be shared, please put that in the chat too, so people know. We will share the slides that we have, and as you know, if you came in earlier, we are recording this, and we'll put a recording up on placemaking.nz, which is what we're launching this week, as I said. So do go and check it out, and there's opportunity there on the website to submit the things you would like to be included in that space as well. So welcome. For now, let's get started and meet today's panelists. Now, do we have Lisbeth in the room, Sophia? No, not yet. Okay, that's a little bit of a problem. As that was the first person to talk, so we may be having 2 people, we'll just see. But if she pops up, can you just let me know? I'll come back to her. We'll go then to Philippa. Kia ora, Philippa. Lovely to have you with us today. Please tell us a little bit about yourself. I can't see. Oh, here you are. There you are.
Yeah, I'm here. My name's Philippa Holmes. On the poster, I've got Espargo, and that's a social enterprise that is just coming to the end of its journey and moving into a social enterprise called the Good Fale. I've got 14 years of community development experience, and most of the work that I do now is focused, well, the vehicle of the work is through social enterprise. And this year, a lot of my work, 99% of it, has been focused on food security and food sovereignty in the food system. doing a lot of work around that COVID crisis. And it's been a year, but very grounded in our people and the grassroots of the community. I'm based in Tāmaki. So I live here in Tāmaki community as the Panmure Glen Innes, Point England, but do a lot of work around that Maungikiki Tāmaki area. So a lot of thinking at the moment around how all this work sits in an ever-changing Auckland landscape, especially where economics and house prices have a lot to say about where people can be situated and the impact that has on all the work that we do. So, kia ora, that's me.
Kia ora, thanks Philippa, so much already in that little introduction going on. But let's welcome also Finn. Ngā mihi, Finn. Lovely to have you here too. Please introduce yourself. Finn, we can't hear you.
Is that any better?
Ah, much better.
Sorry. Kia ora koutou. So my name is Mackesy. I live in...
You're very quiet though. Sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if that's
okay.
the same
Is
for
that
others.
any better? Better?
Yeah, thank you.
So my name is Mackesy. I live in New Lynn in Tāmaki Makaurau, so kind of central West Auckland. Been here at least in Tāmaki Makaurau for about 15 years now, and been involved in placemaking, community development that whole time. I've worked in, I guess, the community kind of sector, working as a resident in placemaking, as well as in the kind of social enterprise space and for local government, and also as a business, I guess, working in providing services around participatory design processes, all in the placemaking space. So I've got a passion as a, community empowerment, I guess, as well as having places serve people and people serve places. Kia ora.
Cool. Thanks, Finn. It's lovely to hear from you. Do we have Lisbeth, Sophia? Not that we know of, unless Lisbeth is on the iPhone or something like that. No Lisbeth in the room? Doesn't look like it. All right. If you can send her an email, please, Sophia, and let her know that we've started and we've started without her, that would be awesome. Thank you. So ka pai, rolling with it. Two great speakers with us so far. Well, welcome again, everyone, as the room gets more full. Lovely to have you here. So, community-led placemaking. It's not the only way to do placemaking, but placemaking, good placemaking, values and includes local knowledge and everyday experience as much as any experts, and it does include experts as well. And together, I think we can be better when we work together. But the community-led aspect can be a really key way, in my experience, to help neighbourhoods and neighbours in neighbourhoods, including the businesses, reflect what matters to the people that live in them, especially when locals have decision-making and leadership roles. And we were going to go to Lisbeth first and talk about Beach Haven, but I think we'll skip over that. Well, we have to because she's not here, and I'm not going to speak to Beach Haven. But I was thinking I'd go to you, Philippa, around placemaking, around what it looks like in your area, and maybe you're thinking about the community connections and the shared kaupapa and identity, belonging, and the meaningful mahi and aroha even for that comes out of placemaking. And you talked about crisis and stress, COVID, but also how those things are really important in regular times too. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how neighbours are remaking neighbourhoods in your part of the city and some of the things that you've noticed that are key to success?
Yeah, so I thought today I'd ground the kōrero for me in a project that we've actually been doing this year, which is around that food security work. And so out of COVID, what happened was, what we noticed is during level 4, lots of the normal pathways that people went to get food support closed down because a lot of the volunteers, they were government guidelines meant they were not meant to be out of their house. And so what it did is all these groups were like, and locals were like, we have got a problem to solve and we need to get together. And so we formed this project called the Kai Collective Project, which was a bunch of different local leaders, agencies. We had, people higher up in the system in there. We had local leaders on the ground. who came together because they wanted to make sure that people were okay. And what we realized is that as a project, this big beast of a project that needed to come out, and we, you know, did quite a lot of work and got quite a lot of funding. There was bits in there that were really what we call the unsexy back end. We told everyone, look, we need to get together on the unsexy back end to streamline admin and resource, you know, financials and funding applications, stuff that, you know, a few people like to do, but not everyone wants to do. But that bit that happens on the ground, that bit that happens to communities, how communities wanted to respond to getting food to their people, we were like, that's intimate and that's magic and that's community specific and culturally specific. And so we talked about sometimes we scale the wrong ends. And so something we really wanted to talk about was, and be able to empower, is that magic bit on the ground was where we were going to be able to weave support, where we were going to be able to make sure people didn't fall through the cracks. And overwhelmingly this year, what we've learned is that the work that happened neighbour to neighbour, the work that happened, you know, family member to family member or connection within spaces, that was where the real magic and support and the critical bits to well-being and people being well in their spaces happened. And so it was, but what it challenged is the normal structures that we put in place of how things happen. So generally with food support, people like fill out a form, answer all these slightly terrible questions. And then if you, you know, tick all these things and you answer in the right way, you may eat. And if you don't, well, off you go to make many more phone calls. The way communities respond to it, we've got local leaders. And by local leaders, I mean they're people who the community will often go to their homes because they see their homes in their community or the spaces these people interact with that are community spaces as safe people. And so they'll go to them and they'll be like, can you help me? And they would be providing all this other support. All they just lacked was being able to hand over a food box. And so we were able to enable them to have food and resources to respond. And it's, and then what a bunch of us who really are interested in this work were able to do was to capture that work and those stories and feed that back to the systems. And so what it's been able to do is really disrupt, I think, placemaking for me is a tool in the kitty of community development. And looking at that very human person on the ground level is really how we're going to be able to disrupt systems that are not working currently. And so it's been really interesting to see synergies and conversations we have right across community development in all different fields of, you know, health and justice and whatever I've ever been involved in. But this year it's seeing all of that come through with food. And so we were able to unlock places that communities already went to be central spaces they came to for support, because during COVID it just uncovered that was a critical need. But I just was hurrying back to get to this meeting today from one of the communities we were working in, and they're now talking about a community garden. They're talking about unlocking unused spaces in their community to you know, do a bunch of other stuff with. So it was really just, it was able to bring together all these bits of magic that we can name with stuff, but really it was allowing space for human to human, neighbour to neighbour, a community experience. So that's been a real privilege to be able to walk alongside and see that work in what has been a somewhat grim year in some parts of it.
Indeed. So if we're thinking about some of the tips then, what I'm hearing, and others may be hearing other things, but it sounds to me, Philippa, that some of the success things for the work that you've been doing this year, which has been an unusual year, but sort of also just reveals things that were already going on, right? We were talking about this a little while ago about how COVID just sort of shone a spotlight on stuff that a number of people, including systems, perhaps turned a blind eye to, and it became impossible to, because actually one of the good things about COVID, there are a couple, maybe not many, but is that we're only each well when all of us are well, and that pulled, you know, put a spotlight on some of the people that weren't doing in places, weren't doing so well, and that were able to be ignored. But what you were saying, I thought in there was working at a human scale, relationships. So key tips, if you like, is it's not about transactions, it's about relationships. And in fact, in some ways, it's not about what you're doing, but how you're doing it. Would you say that?
It's definitely, I was like, when we talked about those top tips, I really reflected on, you know, not just the project this year, but the work that I've been doing. And for me, it came down to, yeah, it's about people. And sometimes I think we forget that. And more than that, it's about being whole people and being able to be our entire selves in spaces. And, you know, the second thing I thought was really key this year for me is like, there's magic in collaboration. Like collaboration's hard because you have to give up control and other people have different ways of working. But overall, the magic that happened this year would not have happened without collaboration. And it's, I think sometimes we talk about like collaboration as a buzzword, but it's like, it's magic, but it's hard to do. And you just have to lean all the way in. There's going to be great bits and there's going to be tricky bits. And it really is about the spirit that you bring to wanting to connect and be with other people. And the last thing for me this year around, if I could do a top tip, and it's like, it's less about the vehicle and it's more about the kaupapa. So we can often be like, in community development, I feel like in our sector, we sometimes can get quite like, well, we're community and we do this, and so we get the community voice. And you're like, got these other humans who are like I'm here too and I live here, but I just happen to work for like council, I happen to work for a government department, or I happen to work for, you know, whoever else. And so like everyone has got a place. It doesn't mean that all places are appropriate. I think that sometimes, you know, but it is less about the vehicle and more about the kaupapa and figuring out who's got what expertise and roles. But community led for me, and I just came from a talk where Tara was talking with community, so I'm going to steal one of her lines. She'll be like, but she was like, community led means community have the pen. Whoever we define community to be, they are the ones writing the plan. We can all support it in whatever roles and whatever hats we have, but whoever is sitting in the role and the hat of community, they get to be the one doing the writing. And so I think, yeah, for me, it was, you know, placemaking as a tool, less about the vehicle, more about the kaupapa, and lean into the magic of collaboration, which means letting go a little bit of control. But the journey's worth it, I say, as someone who likes control.
Nicely said. I think that thing, those are great tips. And I think that thing about the community having a pen is so key. And yet when I'm working in community development, particularly placemaking a little bit too, is community often want help with the pen, you know, talking about those forms that you were talking about. And so one of your other tips seems to be about disrupting the system, or at least on that level. And I think, yeah, less writing in the pen and more doing, and being somehow assessed and enabled in the doing would also be useful. That might be a conversation for all of us as we come into our open space. But let's go to Finn, because I think that last point, Finn, is definitely one of the things we value most at Catalyse too, the mahi tahi ko tahitanga, working together more than the sum of the parts, you know, when we work together. And actually, even when we disagree, if we persist with a collective approach, the outcomes are often better and the connection's stronger. You know, you don't have to like someone to work with them and get a good thing going. That's perhaps something to think about too, or you might want to talk about. But we really need those different skills and talents and resources, different life paths, different experience. Finn, do you want to tell us a bit about that side of community-led placemaking and your experience, and some of the things you might say to others about wanting to work in these ways?
Yeah, so I guess I've got experience as someone who facilitates placemaking processes where I guess I have that's kind of my role. And then I'm in other spaces where I'm just a community member, one of many, and I've been involved in community placemaking where I've got a particular agenda. And I think placemaking should look a certain way, mainly around resilience building. And so often the physical manifestations that I've been trying to push in that space are around local food production, you know, the reestablishment of mahinga kai sites, albeit in a 21st century kind of context. And noticing that when I bring a certain agenda and what that should look like is there's pushback, you know, not surprisingly, upon reflection. And one of the things I've identified is that we don't actually have to agree on what's important. We just need to create the space to have conversations about what's important. And then out of that, things kind of sort themselves out and people find shared passions, shared goals, shared identity. And so as an example, when transition culture landed in Aotearoa in 2008, I kind of followed the rule book and had a real focus on peak oil and, you know, the implications of energy descent on the country and climate change, and realizing that actually a lot of the people I was working with didn't care about those things at all. You know, that wasn't what it was. So then the conversation started to open up and go, cool, well, what is important to you? And through those shared conversations, there was always alignment. You know, there was always alignment, and there was difference, but it was that shared alignment and that kaupapa, as Philippa alluded to, that allowed us to kind of cut through. So it was like, okay, well, maybe climate change isn't important to all of us, but actually living healthy quality lives is, or whatever that might be. And that created the space for others to own the kaupapa. And it also gave really useful feedback to, I guess, those of us who did have a strong agenda to maybe quiet down a bit, you know, and kind of go, okay, cool. So we're one voice among many. And I think it allowed the group to navigate itself as opposed to the loud voices. Working on the, I guess, other side of the equation in a facilitator space is one of the things I've noticed is there's often quite a lot of kickback or pushback with the sense of they're not community, and often it comes from local residents, but they have a strong sense of, you know, I get to dictate who's community and who's not. And so opening up that conversation and I guess really pushing in on that and going, you know, are local businesses not part of this community? Are local agency staff members not part of this community? You know, they certainly impact on this community. They certainly have a lot of leverage in decision making. They have budgets. They have all these other things. So what if we consider them community? And where that stops to not work is when the local voice in terms of those people who spend most of their time in a particular place get drowned out by a whole bunch of, you know, bureaucrats or whatever else. But having said that, I find the conversation is much richer, and the distance traveled is often much further. You know, there's much more leverage points when you actually have people with who have oversight, who understand what might be happening in, you know, in the council realm, or what might be happening in even a local business association or whatever that is. And so being able to invite those people in a really genuine way and say you are part of this community and you're actually needed on this journey seems to work quite well. And it also allows for, I guess, a reconfiguring and a richer discussion of who community is. The other bit that I will say about that is what I have found is when one of the cautionary tales I'll tell around that is when the political dimensions become too strong, is they have the ability to undermine community-led placemaking quite significantly. And so yeah, it's often there is a need to just keep coming back to kaupapa. So a lot of the time I'll spend sometimes the first months just focusing on really grounding ourselves in kaupapa so that we're really clear on the foundations on which we sit. And well, I think there's a really important need to have early and quick wins and to visually demonstrate success, not at the expense of those kind of longer term aspirations. And so having those foundations really solid allows when there is that raru, you know, when, you know, stuff happens and communities don't always get on, it gives you some place to come back to without the house burning down, to use that metaphor. And so that's what I found really useful is building in values into the placemaking kaupapa, and also bringing in some kind of statement of purpose or a vision or a mission, but something that again grounds the people in the kaupapa so that they can kind of go, oh, I can see myself in this, but I'm only one person who's owning this. And so that helps the group focus on what's important, not necessarily on a political agenda or even an opportunity. You know, that's another thing that I see happening often is opportunities arise all the time. And if they're, they may or may not serve the community-led placemaking, they may actually serve a secondary agenda, and the group can spend months getting waylaid in, and then they kind of go, oh, why are we doing this again? And so, yeah, I guess that's one of those tips, is to create that navigational compass early and check in regularly against it, knowing that you might need to reset it occasionally, but it's a group process of resetting that, and it gives you your, you know, your true north, or whatever it is, your matariki rising, so you know where to set the calendar and to calibrate yourself against.
Yeah, those are great tips. There's a lot in there, Finn, from adapting things, not just following the rule book. I can remember a lot of that around the transition stuff as well, and learning to create space. I thought you said something really useful early on as well around questions, and powerful questions can be so much more useful to developing group, that kaupapa, that foundational stuff, than advice, because often we're advising from our set agendas as well and our set perspectives, so it can actually undermine that group purpose, I've found. Is that something you've found as well?
Absolutely. And the strategic questioning and appreciative inquiry and those kind of frameworks and lenses are quite fantastic. There's nothing quite like a well-placed question that really has a group kind of own whatever's there and gives the vehicle to kind of navigate through that. So yeah, I can't say enough about a well-placed question.
Absolutely, I completely agree. You have to be very present though, don't you? And it can be hard to facilitate something like that when you're of community. So that's really interesting, your comments about community, who is community, and how do you guide it? Because at least I find this, you may not, if I'm doing something really local in the community I'm in, I'm part of it, and it's a couple of hats to wear, and to be present enough to then ask a well-placed question that doesn't just push my own agenda is quite a dance. Any thoughts on that? Philippa might have some thoughts as well.
Philippa, you want to go?
Yeah, it is all the time. And, we obviously I live in a community where we've got the Tāmaki Regeneration Company, and so many of the people that work there live here. And so I find myself also in this weird position. Sometimes I have to stop myself saying something to someone because I'm like, actually, their community. And so I think it's just constantly, it's hard because I really believe it's the inner work. It's just like checking in with ourselves, like, wait, what's going on here? Maybe before I say something. And I find sorries are really helpful too. You go back to someone like, I'm so sorry. That wasn't cool. But yeah, and I think it's just whenever you feel like, oh, this feels a bit weird, or maybe just keeping that inner dialogue going. We've got, a big summit project coming up at the moment. So much of my work is tied up, and so much of it is me, the stuff, what's coming out of my head. But I have to sit in the summit as a space of not saying much, like I've helped to create this thing, but it shouldn't be me speaking. And so yeah, me and Tara did this conversation last night. Like, it's hard because we're like, that's why we're so bad at promo, because everyone's like, you need to take these things, but it's I think a deep belief in that doesn't benefit the work. And so just leaning into the kaupapa constantly about, if I'm asking this or saying this, what's it for? And saying sorry when needed.
Great advice, I think, that inner work as well. And I find Art of Hosting have a thing that was, I don't know if it was developed by Mary Alice Arthur, but I use her version called Fourfold Practice, about helping to know how I need to turn up, and about, it has these things about, the first thing is to host yourself. Who do I need to be? How do I need to be today? Am I driving a point? Am I hosting other people's, giving space, like Finn was just saying, for other people to come together and guiding that? How do I host myself? How do I host others is another one. How do I be hosted by others? When you're so used to being the driver of a summit or the facilitator here, the street champion, sometimes it becomes a default position, and you forget to actually, when someone else has invited you, to turn that off, and be there, not just in the listening as well, not talking or less talking. It's all pretty tricky. I see we've got Lisbeth in the room, so I'll just get you some chance to ground yourself a little bit, Lisbeth, but we're going to come to you soon. The other thing I really loved, I think, of your lots of things in there, Charlotte, from both of your kaupapa, but the front loading, Finn, I think that's one of the things, in the disrupting of the system, Philippa, that kind of go together. Often we get funded to deliver a thing, a summit, for example, or a streetscape, and it's all that work and the front loading of that kaupapa, of those relationships, that the tension between early and quick wins, and actually just space to come together. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, the space to have those values, and even ground rules, can be really useful there. Finn, have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I guess further to that is, I also sometimes get some heat around it, but I'm a really big fan of spending the time to actually get to know place. And I think often when we're dealing with community-led placemaking, there's an assumption of, no, I know this place. I've lived here for however long I've lived it. And while I think there's truth in that, obviously, is taking, and, I guess I have a bias around, I guess, an ecological worldview, but taking the time to actually step back and go, okay, how does the land shape this community? and really starting to have a place source understanding of the community context in which we find ourselves. And I find that really useful because sometimes it often shifts the priorities for the community, and it leads to new insights and understandings around, we have these chronic issues for a whole bunch of really pragmatic reasons that actually we've never thought about before. And so it does take extra time to do, but I find it leads to a richer sense and understanding of place, and it speeds up things later on from a placemaking point of view, in terms of people are so much more grounded in place.
Yeah, I agree.
That the responses often aren't just about my needs or, more of the superficial stuff. They just they've got roots, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think that's where insider outsider can be useful too, in your whole thing about what is, who is community. Is that people who have influence or budgets over your community who may not have walked the streets, especially with you, but also those of us I've lived in my house for 21 years, I think I know my neighbourhood, but I walk with someone else and they see it completely differently, for better or worse, but it helps me to remain open and not become closed. I do love my bubble. Every now and again, it's good to have my bubble popped. And even if I scurry back to my bubble, that's all right too, at least I tried, to see the other perspectives. But often, actually, those other perspectives are hugely enlightening for me and of massive value. Lisbeth, you haven't had the benefit of all of the conversations so far, which has been fantastic.
No, I'm very sorry about that. Very apologise. Yeah.
It's all good. But let's go into Beach Haven and some of the work that's been going there. We've been basically talking, no real slides, but I'm happy to put your slides up. Maybe tell us a little bit about what Finn was saying, as much as placemaking improves places, it also forges community connections. When we were talking the other day, you were talking about, meaningful mahi and aroha, and we started with that with Philippa as well. So tell us a little bit about, how we know that placemaking is important a lot of the time, all the time, but it's often so much stronger and more relevant when it comes from those who are most likely to benefit from it. And I think that's what's been happening in Beach Haven, right? As locals have been really leading what's been going on there. Tell us about what it looks like in your experience and a couple of things you've learned along the way. And let me know if you want me to put slides up.
Yeah, if you could just start with the slides, I'll just talk to my slides for a minute. I think you'll get my perspective from my slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been involved. I became involved in the Beach Haven placemaking group, I suppose, from the first time I moved to Beach Haven, which is 30 years or so now. I was very aware of what a fantastic, beautiful place it was, and I loved a very diverse community, which is one reason why I moved there. But it was very underrated and very, the environment was especially around the village shopping centre, was very down at heel and just definitely not as good as it could be. And I can always see potential in things. And so the placemaking group was started up. And it's been going since about 2009, actually. When I've been involved since about 2010, and it originally, I just want to put that. Oh, if you could go next, please. I keep pushing the down button, but I haven't got control.
Yeah, sorry. It's
me. I've got to change my way of doing. Yeah. So in the beginning, I put there was a road to nowhere in a vacant lot, and that was really just summed up our little village. When you arrived in the village, there was absolutely nothing to say that you'd actually arrived in Beach Haven at all. And when you came down the main road that you can see on the left, you can see the back of the sign. It says to Glenfield. And so that was it. So we were like, hang on a minute, this is a really important place to all of us locals, many of who had lived there almost all their lives. I was only a newcomer at the time. And then there was an old post office, which had been derelict post office for 20 years. And it got pulled down, and there was a vacant lot in the middle of our little village, which just made it seem even more undervalued and not very inviting. So we decided to do something about that. Oh, next, please. Yeah, so actually the placemaking group itself actually started up about a year before I joined, and it was started up as a community meeting when it was well recognised in the community that more could be done and needed to be done. And so the local board got David Enwhite over to facilitate a community meeting, which came up with a whole list of stuff that could be done in our village to make it more of a community-centred space. And so we still work to that list nowadays, even 10 years later. Next, please. So the placemaking group was formed, and it set about taking, I think we take a project by project approach. We look around our community, we talk to our community, and we get ideas on how we can make our community place, our space, our village, our whole environment so much more welcoming and useful to the community, and just improve the community vibe. And the first way we did that was to actually create 2 gateways into the village, which both have, as you can see there, the name Beach Haven prominently displayed, even fluoro at night so people driving down the road can see it. And we did a whole lot of murals to improve the look of the village, and also to contribute to the knowing of the history of the village. And you can see there the old flying boats that used to fly in down the road from Beach Haven on the harbour. Next one, please. Yeah, so in 2012, the post office was demolished very suddenly without anybody knowing. And so we decided to do something about it. So we asked the council if we could please do something in the space, create a community garden. And they said, yes, we can do anything we like as long as it can be bulldozed later. So we organised a huge community event, and up to 100 people turned up with their plants and put them in the ground. And so started our community garden. And after a couple of years, that was we maintained that, and it was such a success that the council said to us, well, we'd like to give you $250,000 to develop a proper community garden, and we will help you. And so we went full bore. We said, fantastic. So we ended up with, next please, the Opakatai Community Garden, or Opakatai Beach Haven Garden, which has become the central piazza, the central space of Beach Haven. And from this, a whole lot of community development has happened as a result of having this beautiful community space, which facilitates community events, concerts, all sorts of things. Yeah, including we have a children's playground, we have a community garden, as in herbs and plants and lemons and things like that. And our garden actually won the New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects Community Garden Award a couple of years after it was completed. So which is a bit of a moment of pride for us all. Next slide, please. Yeah, and we did definitely really want mana whenua input into our garden, and we got it, and you can see it in the garden here with the weaving of the boardwalks and the vision of the meeting place, central meeting place for Beach Haven. And that sign, design in the top left-hand corner there symbolises the meeting of the 4 winds. So it was recognised that Beach Haven is a very diverse place, and that people from all over the world come and meet at Beach Haven in this space. And that was the kaupapa behind the design of the garden. Next, please. Yeah, and then so ongoing wise, we were allowed by the council to have flowers and fruit trees and all sorts of beautiful plants in our garden, roses, the whole caboodle, because we agreed to look after it, and we're still looking after it, you know, 5, 6, 7 years later. And that's the placemaking group is involved in that. First Sunday of every month we turn up and do the gardening in Beach Haven, and we get to meet a lot of locals, and we get more and more locals joining us all the time to help with the garden. It's a real draw card for us. Next one, please. Yeah, and we have ongoing projects all the time. We move from project to project. We complete one, we maintain it, and we move on to the next one. And we rope in as many of our community members as we can get. Our latest one is the Beach Haven Hall entrance, which is just adjacent to that first gateway. It's the entrance to our village. It was a very down at heel look, and now it's being upgraded. You can see the community people there digging holes, post-hole boring, etc. Yeah, next one, please. And we're always on the lookout for new ideas, and we're always looking forward. And you can see there on the left, that's actually an old Frigidaire fridge I saw at Ruakaka up north, which is a perfect place to store your books for your swap a book project. But we're always looking. So next one, please. We're always thinking to the future. And this is this is for the project from Public Spaces. This was some of their suggestions for, I'll just move that out of the way, some of their suggestions for community placemaking events. And it's to collectively reimagine and reinvent public spaces as the heart of every community. And this, I know there's been a sort of a change in the way thinking about placemaking, but we stick to David Enwight's original vision, and that is definitely defined by that statement. the Project for Public Spaces also listed these things as being important for placemaking, that the community knows best. Absolutely, we feel that the community knows best. And in fact, we feel that the community does it best with council, but we're not dependent on council. We do things without council as well. In fact, I think David Enright says you do it despite the council, and sometimes we do that too. But we definitely would like to work with the people with the money. That it's definitely a group effort, a community effort. It absolutely requires a vision, and it requires the selling of the vision. And so you've got to be able to put across your vision or collect the vision from the community and then put it out there for the community. And then you get that community buy-in, that community support, the feedback, the funding, the practical support that enables that project to go ahead. Without that, you know, it's very difficult to get community buy-in. In the beginning of our project, we had an artist as part of our group. He's still involved in our group, and if we need him, he will still come and help. And he seems very supportive. But as a result of having this artist be able to draw and produce pictures of the vision especially for the garden, for any other space really, that enables us to be able to sell that vision to the community and get community buy-in right from the start, and that's so crucial. It absolutely requires patience. Every project we've done has taken about 3 years, and that's just from start to finish. By the time you tick off the final thing, it's a 3-year job. So you've got to be committed, and you've got to have persistence and patience. We don't have too many naysayers, thank goodness. Most of our projects get a great deal of great support right from start to finish, and continuing after that as well. The garden being a great indication, example of that. We don't have any money. We never have any money. If we need money, we ask for it, and we so far have always received the money we need. We don't worry about money. We don't limit us either. And that placemaking is absolutely an ongoing process. And if you could just push the next one, please. This is just these are my pointers really, the things that I feel are absolutely crucial if you're going to succeed and do the best for your community and have the best outcome that you can get. And that is, you've got to be capable, competent and committed, and you've got to be seen to be these things, because then people will work with you, and then they'll come back and work with you again, and then they'll have ideas themselves which they'll present to you to see if you want to be involved, so you can get involved and make things happen, and if they think that you're up for it, and that you're so committed, and you're committed, and you're able, and that you are available. Be nice to the people with the money in the mana. Yeah, absolutely. We do need money. And if you want money, you've got to be nice to the people with the money, and they will support you. That's what you put forward your good idea and be competent and capable, and they will actually fund what you're doing. Yeah. And the thing is, whatever your placemaking's got to be sustainable. It's a long-term thing. I mean, I suppose you could have a placemaking group that does one project and then disbands, but I mean, I think sustainability is crucial. We go for sustainability as far as environmental, the environment is concerned. Everything we do is designed to enhance the environment, both the physical, spiritual and emotional environment, but also where it needs to be sustainable in a way that you've got to be able to maintain it. You've got to be able to keep on it. And it's no good doing something and then it all just falls into disrepair later. David Enright always says it needs to be a sprint, not a marathon. So we do tend to have sprints, and then we might just quieten down for a while, and everyone has a rest, and then somebody gets a new idea and we're off again. So that's kind of the way we work. And you need to take a very, very long-term view. Nothing happens fast. It all takes forever. And yeah, at least 3 years. Every single project so far, 3 years. And that's really it from me. Yeah. Cool. It's a thing. You got to have the passion, otherwise, yep, and that long-term commitment. If you want
awesome. Thank you so much, Lisbeth. That's really interesting. I'm very keen to see the long-term commitment. Our people keep coming back, and those tips are really useful, because it's a common thing, is that it falls to the few for lots of people. But rather than me talk now, because we're getting close to our end, we've got 15 minutes. What is sitting with other people? What are you thinking about? I haven't been looking at the chat. Sophia, do you have some questions that you want to say that have come up, or does anyone want to actually talk themselves?
We don't have any questions in chat, so I encourage people just unmute and ask them out.
Yeah, how can community-led placemaking work in your place? What's already happening, things that you want to say, or challenge, question, things that don't work in your place?
First, I'm delighted to see a national effort. I've been doing placemaking for about 30 years, both in Toronto and here. The things that I do, I won't talk for long, but the things that I do have been starting off by picking up litter, which then attracted attention. People say, I'll help you. And then next thing you know, you've got a clean area, and setting up a park. I busk each week in downtown Palmerston North for a couple of hours as my practice for the week, playing out. And I also put seat benches out in public, which I find great because people sit down on a seat bench, and I've labelled each seat bench with community seating. Now I do that because when they sit on it, they become a part of the community.
That's awesome, Bruce. We can't actually see your face right now, but what a great thing to do. And I know when we sorry.
I'll put my camera on so you can see.
Here we go. Awesome.
I'm just thrilled to see you doing this nationally, because I have to say that in Palmerston North, we have had events run by the City Council, which is very supportive. But the thing I crave has been the get together. We only had one that I know of in about 20 years here, where we were sitting in a circle like we are now, comparing ideas. That is so valuable.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. You need to join with us, Placemaking Aotearoa, Bruce, and bring that energy so we can get more things happen. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Anyone else? What's sitting with other people?
I was just going to say, as far as we're concerned, it's a small group of committed people that make things happen. And there's usually 4 or 5 or 6 people who are very, very involved and come to every meeting and really are the backbone of the group. But then out from that comes people from all over the place. You have this like diaspora of people right throughout your community who will feed back, who will help you when you want help. If you put it out there, no matter what skill you need involved in your project, if you put it out there that you need a post hole borer or whatever, people will come out of the woodwork to help you. It's amazing, if you just ask, and if you can share that vision.
That's very true. I think asking, there's an art in the invitation, isn't there, as much
there is.
The question, and I need something, but how do you invite people in? And Finn, you were talking a bit about this too, almost, my words, not yours, but kind of welcoming people as equals. I don't know if you guys remember that crazy video of the dancing guy, about welcoming someone in as equals. I can't think of his name. It's a mad dancing guy who's at a concert and he's dancing, I don't know, super crazy, bending over, but he welcomes everyone as equals, and then you get a movement, isn't it? Movement in 3 minutes or 30 seconds or something. It's
something like embracing the first follower, or
yes, that's the word. Like thank you.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, because actually people do follow, not because of what you're leading, but because someone else had a good time, right? They say to Philippa, let's say, you should go to this thing because they're doing this great mahi, not because, no offense, Philippa's a great woman, because you are, but actually that they had a good time doing this and it makes sense to them. So the new people come because of the first followers. So that's maybe a tip to keep in there too. Any thoughts on that from your different perspectives? Or anything?
I think if there's a project, people will go for it because they get a sense of worth out of that. They get company. And if you've got a project, they know they won't be embarrassed looking at each other. They'll be wielding a shovel or fixing a fence or something like that. So that's what I found. That's if people need the company. Because to be brutal, I think the best placemakers are the loneliest people.
That's really interesting. And that's true too, I think also, because projects have end dates, and this might be part of what you've been doing, Lisbeth, because otherwise you feel a little bit nervous. I feel a little bit nervous, let's own it, that I might be sentenced to quite a few meetings before anything happens. And how much time do I want to give to that side of things? And much as it's important, like you were saying, Finn, about setting the kaupapa and the values and stuff, a lot of people just want to go and give something back, When I was working in Wanganui, one of the things we found there is that there's a lot of whakamau about some things too, like this was a hangi project in public space after a murder actually, but no one wanted to put the hangi down because if they did it wrong, it would be so whakamau, but they were more than happy to talk about it and to welcome people in. And so it's again that power of invitation and skills match with what needs to be done. Any thoughts, people?
It's interesting you should say that, because we quite often get feedback about our meetings that people come to our meetings and they stay and they like it because we are like, here's the project, right, let's go. Do it. How can we do this? How can we do that? There's no waffling around the bush. It's like, let's do it. We have a collective vision and we're going for it.
That's so interesting, Lisbeth, because a lot of that collective vision with David Enwick was a long time ago. And thinking what you were saying, Finn, and actually Philippa too, about how it's evolving in real time and the need to have that kaupapa. So there's a creative tension there potentially as well. I don't know if Philippa, Finn, or anyone wants to comment on that. It's not straightforward, eh?
Yeah, I think from my side, I always go back. Am I just thinking about this in like real professional kind of language that I've got out of like this toolkit and kitty I've got of things that I roll out, and like, what does this look like in my life? You know, like we spend a lot of time in Niue in the Pacific, and you know, my background is Pacific European, and sometimes I think like, what does this look like as my family? You know, like when I go to my nana's house, that lady just is like, her 4 grandchildren, we're all adults, like we sit on the couch and she's like, I will cook the food, I will do the stuff, you just stay there. And we're like, you know what, in this space I really like to do that. And then I'm like to my kids, you get up and do the dishes. There's these things happening that are part of a family story, and each are unique to how we like to serve as people. So, you know, we hold these family events and we all have a good time, but we've contributed to them in different ways. But that's only applicable at my nana's house. I can't do that at my own house, because then, you know, like, you know, so like sometimes I think, well, you know, what's just it, pare it all back, what does this just look like as humans? And so the same thing happens at community events. We just left from something today, and some people have said from the work that we did in COVID, they're like, this is what we needed. We just needed to do stuff. And I was like, yes, but if the other work had not happened, that had been about building those connections, you never would have been able to do this. And they don't, you know, sometimes it's like harder to recognize because we're like in those moments. So I think it's sometimes it can be really complex to like rethink these things, and it's also hard to put like, it's not a recipe. You can't just be like, I'm going to do this, then do this, and maybe this will pop out. But I think it's just about, again, it's like it's a wider thing. It's about the energy you bring to a space and the intentions, and recognizing that like we have some people, during the COVID thing, we had this big hall. Everyone did all the food packing in there. We have one guy who's actually working with us now, but he would come in to help. If I hadn't checked in with him within 10 minutes and told him exactly how we needed to help, he was like, I'm going. And I'd text him and be like, hey, has anyone seen him? Because he was like, oh, I'm not needed. And I was like, oh no, you were completely needed. And so it was just checking it. Actually, if his hands are being used, just like with my nana, she is with us by using her hands and doing the food and doing the cook. That's how she is with us, and we know that. So yeah, I think recognizing that in community as well, like all those little things, but we can just draw on our life and in our life experiences, I think, to inform us.
Totally. I'd love to hear more about that, but we've got a couple of questions in the chat. Damien, do you want to ask your question? If you're still there, can't see you.
Yeah, it was just around juggling that need to do things well, take time, build relationship, versus professional requirements or, you know, requests for quick wins and things, which I detest the term, because I don't think it's really a win when those things happen. But
never had a quick win.
It sounds like a fun question.
Everything takes ages.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it is maybe low-hanging fruit might be a way I'd frame that, is what, and I think it's not just in the professional space, also similar to what Lisbeth suggested, is there are people who just want to do, you know, they just want to do. And so providing those opportunities for, and to my mind, that usually shows up as some kind of activation. I don't actually find those kind of early projects transforming public spaces or leading to long-term outcomes. But what they do is they build a sense of efficacy amongst the group. We can do this, and you know, they experience success, and it also allows you to, for reporting lines and things like that, to demonstrate what's happening. So sometimes it is a matter of identifying what are some, you know, and I agree, maybe they're not quick wins at all, but some low-hanging fruit that allows us to take action and to celebrate some kind of success, because I think it's as important for contributors to experience that experience of, you know, we've achieved something together, And I don't know that it necessarily needs to be that big and profound for it to be meaningful.
Yeah, good point. I think that's really good. We've got another question, and we'll probably make it the last question. There's some great chat now that I'm looking at. I don't try not to get distracted by it. But Mark, you had a question as well about the land shaping the community. Do you want to talk to that or ask that? I can't see you. Mark, are you still there?
I'm there. Yes.
Oh, good, there you are.
It's been a great session today. Thank you, everyone.
You're a bit quiet, Mark. Do you want to?
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Great session today, everyone. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was really interested in what everybody said, particularly Finn, because I think you're sort of from a real urban environment, and that's where I'm working. And I just sort of feel that sometimes people don't even understand the landscape that they live in. I mean, you talked about spatial awareness. How do you get people in an urban landscape to have that sort of bird's eye view of where they live? So
I'm going to just stop you, Mark, because we can't actually hear you. Finn, I don't know if you've got the chat there. Well, we can hear you in bits. You're coming and going. I don't know.
I think I did hear
Cool.
enough to maybe give a go at a response, Mark.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I think you talked about spatial awareness, and to my mind, it's actually more than just spatial awareness, and that's a component of it, but it's actually, I'd call it like ecological awareness, which has spatial components to it. So it's not just about proximity to other things, but what shaped that place. And so there are geological, there's ecological, there's sociocultural, there's a whole bunch of layers to it, but the deeper we can immerse ourselves in that, the more I find revealing it is. And also it gives a sense of direction as to how did this place emerge? And usually in that there is a, I guess using a bit jargony term, there's a place source there that we can tune into, and that can help us reorient our compass. So I find that deeper grounding gives us the bearings of where to from here. And it's not always that simple, but they give us a deeper sense of identity in the place we connect to. So that pride of place.
That's such a good answer, Finn. Sorry to cut you off. I'm just watching the time ticking over. I think that's a whole thing. One of the things we're thinking about doing with Placemaking New Zealand is having perhaps a monthly korero a bit like this. And maybe and I see Lucy sitting there, maybe there's a whole session there that is around that sort of place sourcing, if you like, a mana whenua perspective too, because I think it was Lisbeth, when you were talking about the naming or renaming, or at least the marking with a sign of Beach Haven, made me remember, and you talked about history too, about how we bring the many views of history and experiences into the present, because they're there. There's lots of invisible aspects of place as well as visible. And sometimes walking a place together brings some of those stories out. That's a whole korero that we haven't got time for in 2 minutes. So I'm not even going to try, but let's think about that, and think also about other kind of conversations that you might like to have, to lead, to contribute to as placemakers, and let us know. We're a collective, so we're doing it on our voluntary capacity largely, and it's only going to be successful if it works for us and if it's done with us and by us. So whatever, if you want to be part of the us as a placemaker, then please contact us and let us know. I'm going to wrap us up for today though, with a minute to go. I really hope that you've enjoyed the korero, the little taster really that we've got there, and thank you so much to Philippa and Finn and Lisbeth for sharing the lived experiences of your places. We'll draft up some of these top tips from the conversation and put it into a document that we'll put on social media and on the website so you can see them written down. We'll also share the recording of the video of today in the same places. If you're in Tāmaki Makaurau, we have a Placemakers picnic tomorrow night at 5:30, which the lovely Jason, who's sitting on the call, is key to organising. So come and just meet other people and have a bit of fun. Paris is going to do a little bit of fun with us as well, and there'll be some music and things like that. But it's basically BYO picnic with some snacks and things. We're going to be bringing the new placemaking kits with us as well. So we have totally redone cards and big kits, discover cards about asset mapping. Have I put that in the right place? And beautiful example cards of placemaking across Tāmaki Makaurau that you can use. There's for use in Tāmaki, but all those resources are free to download for anyone across the country on the website now, so you can use those, and we encourage you to do that. And a final sharing for today is Sophia and I were part of a team yesterday that filmed the inaugural Kumara Awards, which actually was a term that came from the lovely Lucy Tukua about celebrating placemaking that happens all year round. It's only 5 of them. We hope to make them annual, and it's really a homegrown kind of experience, I suppose, of placemaking and honouring that it happens all the time. And this year in particular, as you were saying, Philippa, it's been so important in our crisis, not just around food, but about connection and relationship. We're going to put a teaser up, I probably shouldn't call it teaser, a sample, I don't know, Sophia, what the word is, of what we did yesterday, and you'll be able to hear more about that on social media too. So now that it's 1:01 and I try to finish on time my facilitation, a big thanks to everybody for today. And because I opened us with a karakia, I'm going to close us with a karakia. If you'd just like to take some time to ground yourself in the space and get ready to move to wherever else you're going. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairoa e te aratangata. Koia rā e rongo, whakairia ake te kia runga, kia tina, tina. Haumie, huie, tai. Go well, everybody, and see you next time. Mā te wā.
Thank you very much.